It began, as so many betrayals do, with a phone call. A quiet Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the only sound was the wind rustling through the old apple trees outside my kitchen window. I was 72, a widower for 2 years, still finding my footing in a world Nora had once filled with laughter and light. My son, David, called. He said the property taxes were due, a substantial sum. He'd been helping me with finances since Nora passed, a kindness I'd appreciated. "Just transfer the funds to my account, Dad," he'd said, his voice smooth and reassuring. "I'll handle it. One less thing for you to worry about." I did. $47,000, every penny I had in my savings, gone with a click of a button. I remember the exact date, October 8th. I remember the routing number, the account number, the confirmation code. Numbers have always stuck with me, a habit forged over 30 years as a prosecutor. 5 weeks later, the red envelope arrived. Final notice, property tax delinquency, $47,000, imminent foreclosure. My hands didn't shake then, not yet. That would come later, when I needed them to. But a cold dread settled in my stomach, a premonition of something far more sinister than a clerical error. I called David. He dismissed it as government incompetence, a slow bureaucracy. "Don't stress yourself, Dad," he'd said, the clinking of glasses and distant chatter of a restaurant in the background. "I paid it. This is just typical." But the notice was clear. 15 days until seizure. 15 days until the home Nora and I built, the orchard we'd tended, the maple forest her grandfather planted, would be lost. That night, I opened the old black leather notebook I kept in my desk, the one I'd used to document every case, every detail, every lie. I wrote down the date, the time, David's exact words. It was a habit, a reflex. But even then, a small voice in my head whispered, "Evidence." I remembered the bitter aftertaste in my tea after David's wife, Sarah, started bringing it to me. She'd insisted it was a special blend, good for my memory. I'd pretended to drink it, spitting it into a handkerchief when she left the room. A small, nagging doubt, now a sharp, chilling certainty. They weren't just trying to steal my land, they were trying to steal my mind. The next few months were a blur of calculated moves. I contacted my old friend, Captain Marcus Thorne, a man I'd helped clear of a wrongful conviction years ago. He owed me. His team installed hidden cameras and audio recorders throughout the house, devices so discreet they were practically invisible. Every conversation, every visit, every cup of tea was now documented. I started taking notes on everything: the dates of Sarah's visits, the specific bitter taste of the tea, the subtle shifts in David's demeanor. I even had the tea residue analyzed. The results confirmed my worst fears: a low dose of a slow-acting sedative, designed to mimic the symptoms of cognitive decline. They thought I was an old man losing his faculties, a vulnerable target. They underestimated the mind that had sent countless criminals to prison. They forgot the decades I'd spent dissecting lies, building cases, and anticipating every move. I was playing a long game, and they had no idea they were already caught in my net. The day of the conservatorship hearing arrived. David and Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table, impeccably dressed, radiating an air of concern that was as transparent as glass. David, in his expensive suit, whispered something to Sarah, who smiled that cold, calculating smile I now recognized so clearly. Their lawyer, a slick, confident man, shuffled papers, already tasting victory. I, on the other hand, deliberately dressed in my oldest, most worn clothes: faded flannel, scratched work boots, a threadbare hat clutched in my trembling hand. I bowed my head, letting my shoulders slump, playing the part of the confused widower, just as they expected. Judge Eleanor Vance presided, a woman in her late 50s, known for her sharp intellect and unwavering fairness. She glanced up as I shuffled forward, another routine case on a Monday morning docket. But then her eyes met mine. My right hand, gripping the old cloth hat, was fully visible. The distinctive Y-shaped scar on my palm, a relic from a childhood accident, was stark under the fluorescent lights. I hadn't worn gloves. I hadn't tried to hide it. Some evidence, I thought, is best presented without ceremony. Color drained from Judge Vance's face. Her hand, reaching for her gavel, froze midair and began to tremble. Her eyes locked onto mine, Not with detached assessment, but with stunned recognition. "My God," she whispered, barely audible. Is it really you?" David's smirk vanished. Sarah's eyes narrowed, darting between Judge Vance and me, calculating, trying to understand. The entire courtroom fell silent, a collective gasp hanging in the air. They had no idea who I truly was. Not until this moment. The bailiff announced the case. Emergency conservatorship. My supposed mental incompetence. The words washed over me, but I remained still, my gaze fixed on Judge Vance. Her hand still trembled. 25 years had passed since Boston. Since the courthouse hallway, since the knife. She would remember. Their lawyer began his opening statement, a litany of fabricated evidence, cognitive decline, financial irresponsibility, the need to protect an elderly man from himself. I stood there, hat in hand, the picture of decline. Every word a lie, every gesture calculated. Judge Vance cleared her throat, found her voice. We'll hear arguments. Counsel, proceed." But her eyes kept returning to my face, to my hands, to the Y-shaped scar on my right palm. She knew. The question was what she would do with that knowledge. During the proceedings, David testified first, painting a picture of a forgetful, confused old man, prone to erratic behavior. He recounted how I'd supposedly forgotten to pay my taxes, how he'd had to step in to manage my affairs. Sarah corroborated his story, her voice dripping with feigned concern. They presented forged documents, doctored bank statements, all designed to show my supposed financial incompetence. Then it was my turn. My lawyer, a young man I'd mentored years ago, began by calling me to the stand. As I walked forward, I caught Judge Vance's eye. A flicker of something passed between us. A shared history, a silent understanding. I took the oath, my voice clear and steady, a stark contrast to the trembling farmer they expected. "Mr. Harrington," my lawyer began, "can you tell the court about your professional background?" I looked directly at David and Sarah, their faces now etched with a subtle unease. "For 30 years," I said, my voice resonating with an authority I hadn't used in years. "I served as the senior assistant district attorney for Suffolk County, Massachusetts." A ripple went through the courtroom. David's jaw dropped. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. Judge Vance, however, merely nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "And during that time, Mr. Harrington," my lawyer continued, "did you have occasion to work on any particularly notable cases?" "I prosecuted some of the most complex fraud and embezzlement cases in the state," I replied. "I also served on the governor's task force for judicial reform, where I helped draft revisions to the state's criminal code." I paused, letting the words sink in. "And I had the distinct honor of working alongside a brilliant young prosecutor named Eleanor Vance, who, at the time, was making a name for herself in the Boston legal community." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Vance, maintaining her composure, struck her gavel once. "Order in the court!" But the damage was done. The facade of the confused old man had shattered. My lawyer then presented the evidence, the bank statements proving I had transferred the tax money to David's account, the foreclosure notice showing it was never paid, the forensic analysis of the tea confirming the sedative, and finally, the audio and video recordings. The recordings were damning. They captured David and Sarah discussing their plan to declare me incompetent, to seize my property, even their casual remarks about the bitter tea and how it was working perfectly. The thermal camera footage showed David filming me in the snow, feigning concern while his true intentions were laid bare. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as their carefully constructed lies unraveled, pixel by pixel, word by word. When the recordings finished, the silence was deafening. David and Sarah sat there, pale and defeated. Their lawyer looked utterly mortified. Judge Vance leaned forward, her voice no longer soft but sharp and piercing. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her gaze fixed on David and Sarah, "you have presented a compelling case. And to your son and daughter-in-law, I have only one question. Do you have anything to say in your defense?" David stammered, incoherent. Sarah merely stared at the floor, her face a mask of shame. Judge Vance delivered her verdict without hesitation. This court finds no evidence of mental incompetence on the part of Mr. Arthur Harrington. On the contrary, the evidence presented clearly demonstrates a deliberate and malicious attempt by David Harrington and Sarah Harrington to defraud and endanger Mr. Harrington, their own father and father-in-law, for financial gain. She continued, her voice rising with righteous indignation. The court will immediately dismiss the petition for conservatorship. Furthermore, given the gravity of the evidence, including the administration of a noxious substance and attempted fraud, I am referring this case directly to the District Attorney's Office for criminal prosecution. Bailiffs, take them into custody. As David and Sarah were led away in handcuffs, their faces a mixture of shock and despair, I felt a strange mix of emotions, not triumph, not vindication, but a profound sadness. My own son, my own family, had tried to destroy me. The victory was hollow, stained by betrayal. After the hearing, Judge Vance met me in her chambers. She looked at the scar on my hand. "I remember that night, Arthur," she said softly. "The witness who saved my life. You pulled me out of the path of that car. You took that knife from me." I nodded. 25 years ago, in a dark Boston alley, I'd intervened when a mugging turned violent. She was a young prosecutor, just starting her career. I was a seasoned veteran. I never saw her again until today. "I owe you my life, Arthur," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And today, I repaid a small part of that debt." I smiled, a genuine smile this time. "Justice, Eleanor," I said. "That's all I ever asked for." I walked out of the courthouse into the crisp March air. The sun slanted through the bare branches of the trees, promising spring. Nora's orchard would bloom again. The land, my legacy, was safe. David and Sarah would face the consequences of their greed. The black leather notebook was in my hand, its pages filled with the meticulous record of their betrayal and my quiet, patient fight. On the final page, I wrote one last entry, March 6, 2025. They thought I was an old man who didn't remember anything. They forgot I spent 30 years trying never to forget. I closed the notebook, feeling its weight. Not just leather and paper, but evidence, and victory, and a family destroyed in the name of principle preserved. I had been both judge and defendant in this case, and in the end, justice had prevailed. My reflections stared back from the darkening glass of the courthouse doors. 72 years old, alone, victorious, bereaved. But the orchard would bloom, and that, finally, was enough. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.